Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican Congresswoman from Georgia, of course, did a joint interview with her boyfriend, her significant other, Brian Glynn, who's a right-wing broadcaster. And I want to play some clips from this. They posted it on their social media, so that's where I came across it. Dove into the full interview, and it wasn't great. Of course, given that she represents Georgia, Marjorie was asked about the horrific devastation of Hurricane Helene, and watch how quickly she goes from agreeing with the host that this shouldn't be politicized to politicizing it. Watch, just, you're gonna get whiplash at how fast she flips from going, absolutely, we shouldn't, and also, now let me do it exactly in this very interview.
To your point, President Trump during his remarks said this isn't the time for politics, this is the time for action. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically what he said. And it seems so apropos when you look at some of the damage that we've seen.
Yeah, that's right. And President Trump is a man of action. He's a man of the people. He came to Georgia today and delivered water, delivered gas, delivered so many critical needs that people need right now because they are suffering right now. And this is the president he was for 4 years. This is the president we know he will be again. And this is why everyone is working as hard as possible in all the swing states. Georgia, my state, we are working hard all over our state to turn out the vote for President Trump because America needs a real leader. We don't need Sleepy Joe in the White House. We don't need Kamala Harris, who they're propping up. Here's the situation, Terrence, and this is important for people to understand.
I will say, and this is where she transitioned into her political talking point so rapidly, I will say, I don't know how I feel about this style of an interview. Because Brian Glynn just sort of stands over her shoulder for so long, and I don't know, it's just the whole vibe's off. But, of course, everything she said thus far, until the Sleepy Joe part and the whatever, those are the types of things we should be bipartisan and set aside politics on, which is getting relief to people, regardless of Marjorie Taylor Greene's feelings about Joe Biden or Joe Biden's feelings about MTG. This should be sent to the people in her district who need it, etc. And that shouldn't be politicized, but it's actually her guy, despite them claiming something to the contrary, who jumped into action lying about how Biden was not responding or delayed or not reaching out to Brian Kemp, and just so many lies have been told, and it's really unfortunate. If you enjoy this show, please do click that subscribe button. Easy, free, simple, but makes all the difference. Back to the video.
The reason why the Democrats want Kamala Harris is because she'll be a leader just like Joe Biden. It's just a figurehead. While the unelected bureaucrats, people like Jake Sullivan, people like Antony Blinken, people you've never even heard their names are the ones that are really running the country and truly devastating America. And that's why they're supporting Kamala Harris for president, because she's not intelligent enough and she doesn't have the character and the makeup to know how to lead. This is a woman who's received a taxpayer-funded government paycheck her entire career. President Trump never took a paycheck when he was 4 years for president, and he's a successful businessman. He knows what we go through, and he understands the abuse by the federal government. And so
right on to the politicized stuff, as you can tell. Calling Vice President Harris not intelligent enough to be president, not having the makeup to be president, the leadership skills, despite the fact that many of the criticisms she's levying there, even the ones about who has an upbringing and a background that better informs them for leadership, these arguments apply better for Marjorie Taylor Greene's guy, Donald Trump. Because I think for a lot of people, the fact that Kamala Harris came from a much more humble beginning than Donald Trump, who grew up and was born into wealth, that resonates with a lot of people. And she's trying to flip it around with, well, because Harris has worked for the government elected by people, that means somehow she's an illegitimate leader. But we'll go on to other moments from this same interview.
The polls there in Georgia, many pollsters have this pretty much a neck-and-neck race, not a whole lot of difference. Are you buying those polls there in Georgia? You're on the ground. You're talking to people on the...
I don't know why watching Brian Glenn looking over at Marjorie cracks me up. Brian.
Polls there in Georgia. Many pollsters have this pretty much a neck-and-neck race, not a whole lot of difference. Are you buying those polls there in Georgia? You're on the ground. You're talking to people on a daily basis. Are you buying the polls that this is a neck-and-neck race in Georgia?
You know, I'm not buying the polls anymore because since Congress is out of session and I've been on the ground, I mean, talking to people every single day, I can tell you right now, President Trump has the momentum, and this is the right time to have the momentum because we move into early voting starting on October 15th. So I want to remind everyone in Georgia that's watching this right now, you got to get to the polls, make sure you cast your vote, bank your vote, get it in now. I tell you the great thing about it is as soon as you vote, we take your name off.
Okay, so there she's saying she doesn't buy the idea that it's a neck and neck race in Georgia and the other swing states. Trump does have a lead in the average of polls in Georgia, but this talking point, I will say, gets under my skin that I hear from a lot of people. Honestly, not just MAGA folks across the political spectrum. Whenever polls don't look the way that a person wants them to, often they'll say, well, I've been on the ground talking to people. And my conversations with people show that actually Trump's way ahead. The momentum's in his direction. But often when they say that, especially elected representatives, Marjorie Greene is not just casually walking into a cafe and talking to random people. She's probably citing specifically campaign events that she's at. So yeah, when you're at a campaign event talking to people there to support your person, it's going to seem like all the excitement's around them. That's why polls are valuable. They're not perfect, but they're valuable to give us a sense of where things stand. And then I've heard, just to show you that this does go across the board, one of the things Biden said up until he dropped off the ticket was, no, I can tell when I go to these events, we have people cheering really aggressively. I'm talking to people. I can tell the country's still with me, even though the polls look really bad. That also, I remember mentioning it back then, is not a good answer to the polls being bad. Because no, people coming up to you, being walked over to you by your staff to tell you, how excited they are, doesn't represent necessarily where the pulse of the country is. And so Marjorie citing that isn't super compelling. I also don't know why. I guess I do, and this next clip will demonstrate this a little. But I don't know why Republicans strategically put such an emphasis on overstating how well Trump's doing. Oh, Trump's way ahead, I promise, he's crushing it. When it actually is a motivator when you're just behind, right? If you're just barely the underdog, then you have all the motivation in the world to work your tail off. If you think you're leading and, oh, Trump's going to crush Kamala Harris, then you have less of an incentive to work. So even strategically, setting the accuracy aside of what she said, it doesn't make sense to me. The only real explanation I can give to you, I guess there's two. The first is Trump really thrives off of the I'm a winner aesthetic, even though he just keeps losing. He keeps leading Republicans to losses. But that's a little bit of his aesthetic, which is why he's going to accept that they lost the 2020 election. I think that's a part of it. But the bigger part is if they concede this is a neck and neck race, genuinely, and the pulse of the country is such that it could go either way. If they concede that Harris could win this thing or Trump could win it, then they would have to concede after the election if that happens, if Harris wins, right? They would have to say, before we acknowledge it was close and she ended up winning in this neck and neck race. But if they say, no, we've never accepted it's neck and neck, the polls are fraudulent, I don't buy them, it's only going to be fair if he, based on what I'm seeing and when I'm in real conversations with real people, he has to get a huge victory, otherwise it's stolen. And then it sets up this perception within MAGA, so they'll buy those lies easier, that Trump couldn't have lost. I've been told for months now that he's leading, and that could be what this is about as well. One more clip.
Election integrity, of course, comes to mind. It's been a bone of contention, if you will, between President Trump and Governor Kemp there. Are you convinced that the election, and let's just make it specific to Georgia, are you convinced that the election will be fair and secure there in Georgia? And are you happy with the work that's been done over the last 4 years to ensure that the elections there in Georgia will be secure?
Well, you know, Terrence, I guess I'm one of those.
Oh, man. Yeah, sorry, I'm going to play it, but I don't know why. Just watch it very closely, Brian Glenn. What are you doing here, Brian? I know at some point in the interview he gets asked the question, but it's very strange.
Are you happy with the work that's been done over the last 4 years to ensure that the elections there in Georgia will be secure?
Well, you know, Terrence,
It's like he's mirroring her. He looks at her for permission, and then she smiles, and then he smiles.
And are you happy with the work that's been done over the last 4 years to ensure that the elections there in Georgia will be secure?
Well, you know, Terrence, I guess I'm one of those conspiracy theorists. I'm not really going to be happy until the election results are in and we can see for a fact there has not been fraud. I will tell you there's a difference, though, in the state of Georgia versus other states. Georgia, we actually changed our election laws, and they did a really good job. I'm very happy with what they've done. We also have some incredible people here in Georgia, our state election board, and they are kicking butt and taking names, making rule changes that are so important to make sure that there's...
I'm going to address what she's saying, but my whole mind is fixated on watching Brian Glenn right now. This is just a delight.
No fraud. They just passed a new rule that on election day here in Georgia, we will have a hand count and a machine count, so we can match up those numbers and make sure they're the same. This is like doing your addition and then checking it a second time to make sure the math is right.
Well, it's not like doing that. It is exactly doing that. Yeah, okay. Well, then if Georgia goes for Harris, you've admitted you changed the laws so it's secure now, even though it was secure before, but you're saying it wasn't. Then you have to accept when the hand count is done, and if she wins and the hand count reflects that, it's legitimate. But no, they'll have new claims. Oh, the hand count was fraudulent. Oh, there's a bunch of Antifa people counting the ballots, even though they're Republicans, and we can be prepared for that. I really appreciate Brian Glenn's say, you know, just the insight that he provided was really something. And of course, Marjorie, being the national embarrassment that she is, once again. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Support the show by clicking the join button below.